In a globalized economy fueled by technological innovation, changing work patterns, demographic or cultural shifts, and changes in customer behavior, the life cycle of business designs and products are shortening, and organizations must be able to adapt swiftly. The role of the organization's manpower is very important, and we need the right quantity and quality of people to help us achieve organizational goals. Hi, today's lesson is on human resource planning and recruitment. According to the author of Corporate Bravery, Darren Mariner, human resource planning and organizational strategy connect at the hip. You can't deliver business strategy without making sure you have the right human capital you need in the right places for the task at hand. I personally agree with his view regarding human resource planning. However, at present there are so many challenges. Due to constant changes in labor market conditions, qualified people possessing relevant qualifications are not always readily available. And so organizations need to go the extra mile, dig up every source of information, and exploit every opportunity to find the right people. Vetter defines human resource planning as a process by which an organization should move from its current manpower position to its desired manpower position. Through planning, management strives to have the right number and right kind of people at the right places at the right time, doing things which result in both the organization and the individual receiving maximum long-run benefit. Human resource planning is important as it serves as a foundation for other human resource management functions. This figure shows us the overview of the human resource planning process. You may come across different illustrations showing the same, explained differently, and probably look differently, but the concept will remain the same. So basically, human resource planning process begins with forecasting. Forecasting involves projecting labor needs and the effects they have on a business. The HR office forecasts both short-term as well as long-term staffing needs based on projected sales, growth, attrition, and other factors that affect a company's need for labor. Also, human resource forecasting helps us avoid long-term holes in our staffing needs by keeping on top which of our employees might be retiring, leaving, or those who will be terminated. Determining the demand and supply of labor in the future requires an understanding of not only business requirements and current resource capabilities, but the availability or supply of relevant talent in the market. The organization's demand for labor is usually based on a range of both macro and micro level factors such as the economy, geopolitical relations, government and regulatory policy, industry growth, competitive factors, and trends in technology and consumer preferences. In determining the demand for labor, the following are important: evaluation of current resources or the internal supply of labor. That is, current employees should be evaluated based on their ability to meet projected future requirements, factoring in training, reskilling, lateral transfers, and promotions. Estimates of internal labor supplies also need to factor in terminations and voluntary turnover. Examples of voluntary turnover would be resignation and retirement. Having an understanding of the industry in which our business operates would help us determine labor demand easily. More or less, we have an idea as to when is the peak season and lean season for our operations. As such, we know when more people are needed and when less people are needed. As I have observed in the academe, especially here in the Philippines or here in the University of Baguio, there are more students during the first semester and lesser students during the second semester. I am talking about the tertiary level. And then, of course, there will be very few who will be enrolled during what we call the short term. But the change in the number of students in those terms need not lead to the termination of college teachers. Instead, we can use the skills and talents of our teachers who won't be getting that much load during certain semesters or terms to engage themselves in research. The same thing is true for other industries, like for instance, tourism and hospitality. Managers know and understand when is the peak season for their industry and when is the lean season for their industry. So they know how much people they will be needing, especially during the peak season, and they begin preparing for that even before the peak season actually starts. And they also know the number of people that they will be needing during the lean season. And so they already prepare for that even before the lean season begins. It will not be good for the organization to start looking for people to fill in certain positions once the people are already out of the organization or once there's a vacancy in the organization. It might take time before you can actually look for someone qualified to fill those positions. That's the reason why, even before people leave the organization, we should already have an idea as to where we can possibly recruit qualified applicants for that position. So for some organizations, what they do is to have manpower pooling. So they post wanted ads specifying that it's only for manpower pooling. These people will undergo the usual process of recruitment, but they may not really be assigned immediately to a particular position or job. And basically, that's what manpower pooling is all about. And companies do that just to make sure that they have the people they need for a certain position, or just in case the organization decides to expand, or just in case there will be a sudden increase in the demand for their goods and services, then at least they are ready. Next is on determining labor supply. So after projecting labor demand, the organization also needs now to get an indicator of the firm's labor supply. In determining labor supply, it is necessary that we analyze the organization as it currently exists. In other words, the supply of labor and skill sets that are vital to an organization. This should encompass not only the number of employees and their skills, but also factors like workforce demographics. Demographics may be especially important in workforce planning if the organization has a large number of workers nearing the retirement age, or if it has large numbers of young workforce entrants and turnover rates exceeding those of older, seasoned employees. By analyzing our current labor supply, we will see whether someone in the organization is qualified to take over those who will later on be resigning or retiring. Otherwise, we will have to employ from external sources. It is also important to determine if there is a gap. So we determine labor surplus as well as labor shortage. Once forecasts for labor demand and supply are known, the planner can compare the figures to ascertain whether there will be a labor shortage or labor surplus for the respective job categories. When this is determined, the organization can determine what it is going to do about these potential problems. Both labor surplus and shortage can be very costly to the organization. When there is labor surplus, there can be too many available worker hours, which is not ideal. It is costly when a business has idle employees to whom they must pay salaries and benefits. When there is labor shortage, employers may find it difficult to fill job openings. This may now lead to difficulties in meeting the needs and demands of our customers and clients. Downsizing. Some may think of downsizing as something that a company turns to in times of recession or while facing bouts of poor performance. But there are instances when companies that are doing quite well still downsize their workforce regularly for strategic reasons. Some of the reasons that organizations engage in downsizing is to reduce cost. Another is because of the introduction of new technologies or robots reduces the need for a large number of employees. Another reason for downsizing would be for economic reasons. Many firms change the location of where they did business because of some economic troubles that they are facing. Downsizing is defined by Investopedia as the permanent reduction of a company's labor force through the elimination of unproductive workers or divisions. Downsizing is a common organizational practice, usually associated with economic downturns and failing businesses. Since the pandemic started, many companies have resorted to downsizing to save their business. Last year, Warner Media told the Wall Street Journal on October 8 that it plans to cut thousands of jobs in order to reduce costs by 20%. The company's first round of cuts in August of that year were expected to impact 600 employees, mostly at Warner Brothers and DC Comics. Those cuts included top executives. Exxon, a big name in the oil and petroleum industry, last year laid off 1,600 employees in Europe, and the cuts represent 2% of its global workforce. American Airlines had previously announced cutting 20% of the company's workforce upon the expiration of federal aid. The airline was set, or the airline actually furloughed 19,000 employees as of October 2020. Another airline company, United Airlines, furloughed 13,000 people. So these are examples of the reduction in labor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. What are the possible negative effects of downsizing? According to the Journal of Business Research, downsizing could lead to a host of problems that eventually increases the likelihood of bankruptcy. Among this, downsizing firms lose valuable knowledge when employees exit. Remaining employees struggle to manage increased workloads, leaving little time to learn new skills. And remaining employees lose trust in management, which results in less engagement and loyalty. Many of these effects may have long-term consequences, like reduced innovation that are not captured in short-term financial metrics, and other factors which may potentially harm the organization as a whole. Aside from downsizing, early retirement programs and buyouts are also offered by some companies to address issues on labor surplus. Early retirement occurs when an employee decides to retire before the age of retirement. Generally, the age of retirement in the Philippines is 60, though some companies allow their workers to extend until they reach the mandatory age of retirement, which is 65. Others, however, decide to retire even before they reach the age of 60. Some choose to retire early because they have saved substantial financial resources aside from the expected retirement benefits they will be receiving, so they are unlikely to have to worry about money. I always encourage my college students to save. So when they're already employed, okay, after graduation, they already have to set aside a certain amount of money in preparation for the retirement. Sometimes my students would ask, Mamoy, are you even talking about retirement now? We're not even working yet. But I always tell them, wouldn't you want to retire at an early age so that you will enjoy before you get older? And yes, I know of some people who actually chose to retire early because they want to enjoy traveling, they want to enjoy their hobbies, and they want to do so while they are still physically, mentally, and emotionally capable of doing so. Early retirement is also an option for employees who have developed multiple income streams. There are some employees who look for other sources of income. And for those who are able to find really good sources of extra income, at a certain point, they would decide to actually leave their full-time jobs because anyway, their needs and wants can be provided by their other sources of income. Like I have a friend who's a registered nurse who's actually paid well in her job. She's working abroad, but later on has developed passion for baking. And what she thought was just a sideline eventually became her main source of income. So she left the hospital and focused on baking. Other than that, she also has other sources of income related to her hobbies. So maybe some of you here also are thinking of having, multiple income streams, and this could also lead to a similar decision of retiring early. Why not? For others, it could be brought about by health concerns. They can no longer perform the tasks that they used to do. So they choose to leave work even before the age of retirement. A retirement buyout is a form of early retirement package that employers occasionally offer workers. Typically, they are given to older workers already nearing retirement. Buyouts amount to compensation packages designed to provide incentives for employees to retire ahead of schedule. There are many organizations now that offer attractive retirement packages to encourage their employees to consider early retirement. Big universal banks, for instance, offer handsome early retirement packages. And so there are young bank managers who choose to take advantage of these early retirement packages. Also, other industries do the same. There are also big airline companies abroad that offer attractive early retirement packages, especially to their flight attendants. But why would companies offer early retirement packages, especially to older workers nearing their retirement? It is said that it is more costly or expensive to keep the older workers compared to the younger workers because of higher medical costs, higher pension contributions, and many others. So usually that's the reason why companies would offer early retirement packages. For others, they have to consider the nature of the industry. So where they need younger workers, where they need the younger and more dynamic workers, they would tend to offer a retirement buyout. So again, retirement buyout is used by companies as a strategy to, well, in some cases, cut down costs. And while it can be beneficial to the company, I personally think that this is also beneficial to the employees. Another way of reducing labor surplus or managing labor surplus is to hire temporary workers. Whereas downsizing has been popular method for reducing labor surplus, hiring temporary workers and outsourcing has been the most widespread means of eliminating labor shortage. Temporary employment allows companies the flexibility needed to operate efficiently, especially when faced with the swings in the demand for goods and services. So, like for example, another effect of the pandemic was for some companies to consider hiring temporary workers, especially in places where community quarantine protocols change too fast. Like, let's say, when the government announces ECQ, then later on it eases down to GCQ, then later on, after a few days or even just for a few weeks, they go back to ECQ, which can be very damaging to the company's operations. And hiring permanent workers may not really be a good option. So, in some cases, companies may consider hiring temporary workers. There are some industries where hiring temporary workers can be a better option, especially when they need additional manpower but only for a short period of time, and hiring permanent workers may not really be practical. So basically, flexibility is the main advantage of employing temporary workers. In addition to flexibility, here are the other advantages of hiring or employing temporary workers. First, the use of temporary workers frees the company from many administrative tasks and financial burdens associated with being the employer of record. Another is small companies that cannot afford their own testing programs often get employees who have been tested by a temporary agency. So this would now help cut down on certain expenses. Many temporary agencies also train employees before sending them to employers, which reduces training costs and eases the transition for both the temporary worker and the company. So again, it has something to do with saving. Okay, savings on the part of the company, cutting down on costs. Because a temporary worker has little experience in the host firm, the person brings an objective perspective to the organization's problems and procedures that is sometimes valuable. So those are the advantages of employing temporary workers. There could be other reasons for companies to be hiring temporary workers, and they might have proven this to really work well for their company. Then there's outsourcing, offshoring, and immigration. So at its most basic, outsourcing is about moving internal operations to a third party. Many companies are doing this now. This can come in the form of selling physical plant to a supplier to buy back goods or services, or shifting an entire business division to a third party and again buying the service back. The basic philosophy being to move transactional activities to the experts. in order to give an organization the capacity to focus on its expertise. The BPO industry has grown into the giant industry it is now because of the demand for the services that they offer. Thanks to outsourcing, there are a lot of jobs for people who want to work in the BPO industry. And then there's offshoring, which refers to a shift in business operations to another country. So basically, you're moving the business operations to another country, and usually the reason behind this is again to cut down on cost or to take advantage of cost benefits that are available somewhere else. Like, let's say it's an American company who discovered that it's cheaper to have its operations, let's say, in China. So they move their operations in China, and that is what we refer to as offshoring. It is considered as a special case of outsourcing where the jobs that move actually leave one country and go to another. That is offshoring. And then we also have another strategy here, which is on altering pay and hours. Companies facing a shortage of labor may be reluctant to hire new full-time or part-time employees. Under some conditions, these firms may have the option of trying to garner more hours out of the existing labor force. Despite having to pay workers time and a half for overtime production, employers see this as preferable to hiring and training new employees, especially if they are afraid that current demand for products and services may not extend to the future. So sometimes managers or companies simply have to modify. They simply have to modify work hours so that current employees can accomplish the tasks, so that the company can achieve its objectives, which include now meeting the needs of their customers without having to hire additional manpower or train new employees, which proves to be costly for the company. Sometimes organizations would give additional tasks to certain employees in the company just so they don't have to hire another person to do that job. Also, for a short time at least, many workers enjoy the added compensation. But I'm sure those who have tried this know that the additional compensation is usually not worth it. Yes, you may enjoy additional compensation for a while, then later on you'll realize, wait, I'm tired. And the additional compensation is not enough to relieve you of that stress, right? However, over extended periods, okay, just like what I've said, employees experience stress and frustration from being overworked in this manner. Maybe initially you'll feel excited about having new tasks to perform, but more importantly, you have additional pay. Maybe it may come with additional perks and privileges. Then later on, you'll realize, I'm too tired. The stress that the extra work causes is too much for me to handle, and the extra pay is not enough. So there. So maybe it can work for a short period of time, but later on, when employees realize that it's not really worth it, then it may be good also now for the organization to consider other strategies. So now let's move on to another human resource activity, which is recruitment. This is the process of actively seeking out, finding, and hiring candidates for a specific position or job. It is also defined as the process of identifying, attracting, interviewing, selecting, hiring, and onboarding employees. That's recruitment. And I'm sure recruitment is not really an easy job. Companies spend a lot of money to be able to do the recruitment process well. Some companies even get the services of a third party to do the recruitment activities for them, since not all companies have the capacity to do the recruitment process. Or maybe they do, but they would like to focus on tasks that they do better. So they pass on the recruitment process to another organization. They just simply have to pay for their services. So this is a typical illustration of how the recruitment process is performed. Although not all companies may observe this kind of process, basically the process is the same. Maybe there are differences, only slight differences, depending on the industry, depending on the business. But basically, applicants would go through the same or similar steps in this process. This figure shows us the overview of the human resource planning process. You may come across different illustrations showing the same, explained differently, and probably look differently, but the concept will remain the same. So basically, human resource planning process begins with forecasting. So we have different recruitment sources, and maybe we can find more examples of this through our reporter. So we have internal and external sources. There are some companies who choose to promote from within. So if there are qualified individuals from within the organization, then they just simply promote from within. This is actually a good strategy also to motivate your workers when they know that they also have opportunity to move up the organizational ladder, or to be transferred, or to be moved to a department where they can perform better. In some cases, we don't have any other choice but to recruit from external sources. That's what's important, to train our people so that when the need for someone to fill in a vacant position is there, when there's a need not to fill in a certain position, we can confidently fill it in with someone from within, because we know that these people are capable because of the trainings that we have provided to them. Another would be direct applicants. So some people would just, walk in, right? Submit their resume, their application letter, sometimes even when there are no openings. They just want to take the opportunity. Others are referrals. These are referred by our current employees. They are referred by our clients or customers. We can also look for potential applicants by posting advertisements on newspapers and periodicals. Although, let's face it, there are less and less people who are actually opening the broadsheets. Why? They can always rely on the internet. I know of some people who stopped subscribing from, let's say, for example, they used to subscribe for a daily copy from, let's say, Philippine Star, Manila Bulletin, Philippine Daily Inquirer, but later on they stopped their subscription, and now they can simply go to the website of these broadsheets or these companies. In fact, these companies or this well-known broadsheets can be seen also on social media, right? In Baguio, we have the Baguio Midland Courier, which is really very famous. Although it's only available during Sundays, and that particular copy is good for the whole week, and then another or a new newspaper comes out in the next Sunday. And I see a lot of wanted ads on Baguio Midland Courier. And then there's electronic recruiting, which I suppose because of the dependence of many people on technology, this is probably one of the mostly used medium. So there are many different companies that use electronic recruiting or e-recruiting. Sometimes they use their own website to solicit applications, although this may not be the only way of attracting applicants. They may use other sites, like for example the career networking site LinkedIn. For some companies, they make use of LinkedIn. Then there's JobStreet and many others. And then there are what we call now public and private employment agencies. So of course, there's always the government agencies. You can go to the local government unit, like for example in Baguio, you can go to Baguio City Hall. There you can there are available jobs posted there. Not necessarily in Baguio City Hall, but these are jobs posted by different companies around the city. And then there's also Dole. Okay. You can simply visit the Department of Labor and Employment, and there are also some uh, wanted ads there. So there are different agencies that can help people look for jobs and help employers look for applicants. And then there are colleges and universities. When you go around colleges and universities, you'll see that there are also posters. There are also announcements of employment opportunities. So this can be good sources also of information for those looking for jobs. I know of a lot of people. Some of them were my former students. Even before they graduated, they were able to find a job because of those posters that are usually posted on our bulletin boards, which encourage not only graduates but soon to be graduates to be submitting applications. So sometimes companies collaborate or partner with schools so that it will be easier later on for them also to look for potential qualified applicants from these colleges and universities. Sometimes as early as when students have their on-the-job training or practicum, opportunities are already available. Sometimes that's what companies do, so that they can, while the students are having their OJT, they're practically being trained already, right? So when they evaluate the performance of the trainee, and if the trainee passes based on the standards set by the organization, they get to be absorbed even before graduation. So for the rest of other information which we would like to learn from recruitment, we will listen from our presenters. Thank you very much. Have a good day.